Flashback 8.3 Moral Dilemmas. As Miss Ellis went to order our chicken wings and rum and coke drinks, I struggled with the idea of putting a drug in her drink without her knowledge. It was wrong, on too many levels, to me. The group had stolen and killed for God on our mission quest. We had broken into places and destroyed property. But in every occasion, we were not the aggressors that elected to inflict harm. And here, I am supposed to drug Miss Ellis with Rohypnol, a date rape drug, a roofie. And I am to escort her out of the bar as she would appear drunk and off somewhere with Tiny to alleviate her of her ID, company badge, and then interrogate her for information. Yes, to roofie or not to roofie, that was the question. I just could not bring myself to roofie an innocent person. Miss Ellis seemed kind and respectful. If I stooped to drugging her and stealing her ID and stuff, then how would I be any better than the very evil that we were questing against? No, I will not do as evil does. I will fight fire with fire, but I will not do evil unto others. Miss Ellis returned with a platter with a bowl of barbecue chicken wings and 2 plastic cups full of iced cola and presumably mixed with rum. She chuckled. I hope this will do as our opening salvo. We may have a long day ahead of us. Or not, she smiled quizzically at me. Miss Ellis seemed warm and open to conversation on most any topic. I think she genuinely wanted to just have a non-work conversation with anyone that seemed nice and that did not have an agenda. I related deeply to that feeling. I really wanted to find people to connect with in a deep and real way, not that superficial friendship people talk way that's just almost never real. And so I knew the feeling. We shared an earnest desire to find and interact with a nice and no agenda, interested people discussion. The awkward silence became palpable though. Miss Ellis stood her ground, though she let awkwardness escalate, and it escalated more and more. It felt, well, like the ceiling and walls were going to close in on us. If someone did not break the tense silence and start a real conversation, it was just unbearable. I broke the silence. If it was a contest, I lost. Well, I answered Miss Ellis. I'm exploring Prague. Colleagues of mine, back when I worked for a video game company called Electronic Arts, contracted and even lived for year-long stints here in Prague. I had imagined this random bit of information would be sufficient tourist misdirection. Seeing as I refused to lie, my options were fairly simple. I had to be charming to distract people, clever and witty to deflect people's interests, or beguiling in my misdirection. Of course, there was always outright suppression, but that could be an indirect acknowledgement or confirmation of whatever someone was asking about. So yeah, it's usually charm, wit, or guile, or something borderline otherwise. But they were the okay tools of deception. So grabbing a pair of wings and putting them on my little side plate, I started to cut them with my knife and fork. Miss Ellis laughed audibly as she pointed at my knife and fork. You eat your wings with a fork? And a knife? She could barely contain her hysterical comedy over my apparent silliness. I snarked. Not all finger foods must be eaten with your fingers, you know? In German, the language differentiates eating like a person versus eating like an animal, just with a prefix FR. Essen is to eat like a person, civilized. Fressen is to eat like an animal, like a pig. Anyway, so I tell you this. I can fressen if I want to, I jokingly decreed. It seems silly, but I put my knife and fork aside and grabbed my 2 wings, one in each hand, and ate them like a wild animal. And I made growling, snorting sounds to punctuate my animal eating style. When done, I licked my fingers clean. I looked down at the table, emulating a hyena, and looked up with my eyes elevated to look a little intimidating or coy, depending on your expectation. And I said, "Was that Fressen enough for you?" And with that, I returned to my normal face and picked up my knife and fork and resumed eating as a civilized person does. Or at least so how I chose to eat my chicken wings. Miss Ellis laughed loudly. "You really are funny. I have so enjoyed this little outing, Rick." Miss Ellis then said, "I told you already, my full name is Miss Bera Ellis. I work for Prion Biotech as a technical director. I manage a team of engineers that work, guess it, in biotechnologies." She grimaced. "It's not all that glamorous. But we are hoping to one day put the internet literally inside every person's head. Imagine the world's knowledge and calculation ability all only a thought away. No computer keyboards or mice. No fingers or gestures. Not even looking at something. Just your thought. Your thought will import knowledge, and you will just know it, like you always knew it. Your mind would not know where the knowledge came from, your memory, or your cloud. It's just there. Prion Biotech will give all of this with a small brain neuroimplant chip that can be administered in any medical office or clinic just with a syringe scalp applicator. I thought that sounded terrifying. Prion Biotech's ability to just insert memories and answers into our brains, and you would just assume it was true and always knew it? Right off, I could imagine awful applications of these brain implants. How much of the original person would be there with all these potential brain augmentations? What gaslighting or untrue things could be inserted into your brain as fact? What in the moment perceptions could be confused by real-time sensory replacements? Could reality and fantasy be differentiated? What faulty data or learning like math could be introduced, ruining people's otherwise competencies? What emotional or attitudes could be cleared or reset? Could a person just be turned off or jammed to disable them? Could law enforcement, a soldier, or a criminal jam your brain with a signal? Could a person be essentially turned into a human drone by controlling all of those things? Again, I wondered how much of the original person would be there with all of those potential brain augments and controls. Well, we left the restaurant, and as we left, I said, "I go by Rick Liberty. I was in software engineering too, but mostly in video games. But later I did get into augmented reality at Microsoft." Miss Ellis leaned in, seemingly very interested in my background. She said, "Wow, that sounds fun, much more fun than my line of work." She added, "Look, I really have had a good time with you, but I do keep a strict schedule. I eat lunch, return to work, and head home at night to finish chores, and then more work at home. And on some nights, I get to unwind with a glass of red wine, listening to some jazz. Maybe I exercise sometimes at an all-night gym near where I live in an apartment. It's not exciting, but it's my functional life. It's predictable, and I like it. She nodded a firm, "That's the way it is," nod. So I replied, "Understood. You want someone to walk with you?" And Miss Ellis smiled. Yes, that would be nice. Fancy that. Meet a stranger that buys me a meal and walks me back to work. What a gentleman. Why, it's right out of a fairy tale.